If you want to start or scale your property development business to 8 figures and beyond, then you're in the Experts Podcast with Ben Richards and Jack Jiggins, two serial entrepreneurs bringing weekly insights from our award-winning businesses. In these podcasts, you'll learn how we found, funded and delivered over £80 million worth of property in the last 6 years, with templates you can use, deal analysis and deep dive discussions that will help you build your businesses successfully. We hope you'll enjoy. Hello, welcome to this week's episode. We got a fun-packed episode today. That's why there is a clown on screen. If you're listening into this, the picture is of a clown, and there is a big building control arrow pointing to them because I've got some fun stuff to talk about from some of the conversations that I've been having this week. Before we get into that, if you're tuning in new, we are XP Property, Ben Richards and Jack Jiggins, and we want to be delivering 1,000 homes and £1 billion worth of property in the UK. We don't have a set time frame for that, but it will happen. We collaborate with trusted investors, trusted investors. People describe us as ambitious, transparent and creative, and I think that sums us up quite well. We did a bit of a journey to get to those 3 words through asking our team, asking our external investors, asking our partners, and those were the 3 words that kept coming up repeatedly. So yeah, if you're here for really transparent, honest, open advice around business and property development and property investment, then you are absolutely in the right place. We've got some active investments at the moment. To date, we've raised about £17 million of equity investment towards our deals, and close to now, I think probably £70 million in senior debt finance. So we've been around for a while. We've done a lot in these short sort of 8-year time frame, and we've got open investments actively looking for people like yourself to invest in. So whether that be from a £300,000 loan investment to a £2.5 million equity ticket on an office conversion in London, get in touch because we would love to speak to you about potentially funding some of these deals. In this week's agenda, it is the 26th of September, very special day. I am the big 4-0 today, which is crazy, very, very old I am feeling, but yeah, just another day, I guess. So we've got building control, some discussions around one of the projects that my first line in the email back to them was, is this a joke? So stay tuned to find out what that's about. We've been featured in the Blue Bricks magazine, so thanks for featuring us in there. Sam Kirk, and we'll be talking about some of the benefits of what you get in that magazine and the sort of open and transparent nature of the people that write for the articles in there, and some really interesting stuff that you as property developers and property investors will find very, very interesting. We're going to be discussing public speaking. We touched on it briefly last week, and I feel like it needs a wider discussion around how we prepare for public speaking, top tips that you guys can take away when you're getting up on stage or getting up on in front of people, selling deals and presenting yourselves in the best light. We've got an investor open day at our Muswell Hill project, so stay tuned to find out details around that. What we learned from judging the Property Investor Awards. We spent the whole day in Shawbrook Bank's very swanky offices in central London, overlooking the Gherkin and the Cheese Grater, and we judged some of the nominated entries for this year's award. So yeah, some really interesting conversations that we had during that day. Solving a problem for clients and service providers. So Jack and I have had some issues over the last couple of weeks within our service-based businesses, XP Surveys and Aura, and we're going to be talking about how some of those problems have turned into positives and opportunities, and how you can take away some of that learning as well. If you've been under a rock over the last couple of weeks, then you wouldn't have seen that we raised money for the charity Mind in for mental health awareness. We had a charity paddle event where we played a paddle game from 7 o'clock in the morning until midnight, 17 hours of paddle, and we've closed the donations, and we were presented with a big old check this week. So we'll tell you where we ended up on that final raise, because it's a staggering amount that we're super happy with. And then I had a mother's meeting this week with some of the residents of one of the developments we built a couple of years ago. It's now time to hand over the freehold management company to the leaseholders and the occupiers of those buildings, where effectively they're taking over a share of the freehold and we are relinquishing all responsibility. And I'm going to be talking you through some of the things you need to do to prepare for those meetings, because I did go into it, I think, underprepared. So hopefully you won't make the same mistake with the top tips and tricks that I'm going to be talking through. And then we've got a couple of questions at the end. So thank you very much to those that have asked questions. And we obviously are happy to answer questions throughout this. So start dropping them down below if anything springs to mind. This is an opportunity to ask us for free any problems that you are having within your business. So make the most of it. Cool. I'll start with number one, and it's building control again, just causing so many issues. And I'm sure David Guest, who listens to this regularly, you'll be enjoying this one, and maybe I'll send you the screenshot of what I sent back to building control. But effectively, we are almost finished. We're due to literally finish this site in about 5 weeks, and only about a month ago did building control come back and say, "Oh, really sorry, but we've just done our review with London Fire Brigade, and they have some concerns and some comments around your fire strategy and want you to justify certain things where you've deviated from part B." So building control and the approved documents, which you can see in front of you, they're guidelines. They are not absolute legal rule, which is often misunderstood. Now, you'd be stupid to go off piste completely and just build what the hell you want, because ultimately building regulations and the approved documents are what building control bodies are going to be reviewing against what you've done. But there are certain things within it whereby you can deviate from guidance, because the guidance is always based on typical situations or standard situations which you would normally get on average within what you're developing. When you go off piste, as long as you can justify why you've gone on piste and why the property is still safe, and why in this particular case, when we've got a sort of fire engineered solution, i.e. it doesn't strictly conform to approved document part B, but the situation can be justified being no worse than the situation approved in the part B regulations, then there's no reason why building control shouldn't accept that. So the process has been that we've got a third party fire engineer to write us a strategy that they are happy with. They are happy that it conforms to the premise of part B, which is to keep a building safe and tenants and occupants safe from means of escape and fire detection within a building. And that strategy effectively had a situation through the building where we don't have lobbies off of the communal stairwell for a floor level where there are more than let me start that again. So strictly speaking, to approved document B, where you have more than 2 flats on a floor, the communal stair core should have a lobby between the stair core and the flat entrance door. We don't have that. Our flats open directly onto the single staircase. Now, when that's 2 units on the floor, that isn't an issue. When it's 4 units, like we've got in our situation, that's outside of the approved document. Therefore, it needs a fire engineered justification and solution for it to be acceptable. So to include lobbies, we'd have lost the best part of probably 4 meters of space, 40 square foot in this area. That's 40 times £900 a square foot. That's £35,000. Like, we don't want to lose £35,000 just because we have to create some extra lobbies. We've got 4 one-bedroom flats on the first floor, and ultimately the number of occupants and the safety for those 4 flats is materially no different to having 2 flats that have 3 bedrooms each, for example, where you might have let's say you might have 12 occupants instead of 4 occupants. There's every chance that having 2 larger flats would have more people living in it than 4 one-bed flats where you might have single people or a couple. So there's no material difference from a usability perspective, but it needs a fire engineered solution to argue it. So anyway, we've had the third party report done. The council, the planning, the building control officer and London Fire Brigade aren't happy with just it written in a strategy that's what we've proposed. They want us to justify it. So we paid an extra £2,000 for our fire engineer, which we didn't want to pay, to justify their position. And they wrote a 10-page document pulling out from British standards, why it's no worse than the approved document position in terms of timeframes for people to escape, the modes of detection. We've increased the modes of detection so that if there is a fire, people would be notified faster. They can still escape from the property in sufficient time. And this whole document that they're effectively putting their PI insurance against, saying that we are satisfied that this is a fire engineered solution that meets the prescriptive guides of Part B. That's gone back to building control. They've effectively said we're not happy with that. They want us to pay £3,800 for their third party to review our third party's strategy and report to tell us whether or not they're accepting of it. And that's the point in which I just said, look, this is beyond a joke now. Like our third party specialist, whose PI is on the line here, has justified and is more than happy with the solution. Why do we then have to get your third party to agree it? And this is sort of the issue that we are having everywhere at the moment. Certainly when it comes to fire, nobody is willing to to sign anything off. We had this on St Andrew's Court, where we had to spend £10,000 on a computational fluid dynamics model of smoke ejecting from a window of one of our properties and whether it impacts the neighbouring property.
Easy for you to say.
Yeah, and ultimately it ended up being a dick swinging competition between our third party engineer and their third party engineer. And there's no reason why it won't just be the same thing, because people might have different different ways of interpreting certain rules. But ultimately it's our third party that has put the strategy forward. They're taking the brunt if anything happens and their PI cover is at risk. Yet building control are really playing a stupid game where essentially they've said in their quote, nothing was provided from a quote perspective in terms of third parties reviewing any fire analysis, and now they have to get a third party in, and they're going to have to pay for that, which they have to pass on to us. So we might have to have spent £3,800 plus so the best part of £8,000 justifying a situation that ultimately everyone is happy with, but building control are unwilling to accept it. And this is the state of where we're in. It's a bit of a rant, I know, but I just think people. I guess my tips would be to not, unless you want this heartache and you want to go through having to justify to the nth degree and spend lots of money on external consultants. Sometimes maybe you don't go off piste and you just do to the letter of the law what the approved documents suggest. But I guess when you put it down to sort of ROI, if it would have cost us 36 grand to install the lobbies and it's only costing us 8 grand to actually get these reports done, then maybe you could say it's a good return on investment. But it's a lot of stress and it's a lot of hassle and there's a lot of potential delay. So, make your mind up which one you'd prefer. Yeah, that was it really. Rant over.
Blue Bricks magazine. We've got 3-page spread this month. Big thanks to Sam, who runs the Blue Bricks magazine. Absolutely love Sam. He's kind of, I feel, making more of a movement than just a magazine. He's very keen to make change in the industry we're in. Also, the fact that someone young is running a paper-based business model rather than a digital business model. But as you can see, if you haven't already looked at Blue Bricks, it's a very, I would say, very sort of informal but very content-heavy monthly magazine, as well as events and a network. And it's obviously run by Sam, who's a really, really good guy. And this month, we've got 3 pages of advertising across XP Surveys, Aura Architecture, and the Ground Up Network as well. So sorry if you see our business all the way through it, but we thought we would share that and give Sam a little shout out because he's always doing such a good job. I think he's got another event coming up, which we've been invited to as well. He probably does more events than he does magazines a year, I would have thought.
They are really good. They get a good crowd, some really interesting speakers. And the big events that he does, the one that he did with in the castle a couple of years ago was just insane. So if you can get yourself to some of those, you're going to start mingling with lots of other property investors, property developers that are out there doing some really good stuff in the industry. So yeah, make sure you look that up, get the magazine and start buying some tickets to some of his events. I did also just want to say, we have the opportunity, Jack and I, to write some articles in the magazine. It's always difficult to kind of know what to talk about. So if you have some specific things that you think would be really interesting for us to write about in one of these magazines, then drop it in the comments below, and we'll maybe, if we get a couple of them, we'll pick the best one in a couple of weeks' time. So yeah, get commenting down below. What do you think we should talk about and write an article on for this magazine?
Fabulous. Public speaking. So we actually touched on this, didn't we, last week? And I thought it would be useful to bring up and try and give our listeners, I suppose, our view on it, and also potentially some tips. This summer we had our interns work over this from Reading University with us, and we went to Reading Property Meet, where they do like a 20-second, 30-second shout out. And I was actually really impressed that the interns were up for it and stood up and did a little bit of an introduction and said that they'd done work experience with us, and then sat back down, and they were both really, really good. But I actually thought to myself, as far as an internship and training goes, that should be one of the strings to their, growth and bow, because the amount of times I've been to talks and the person doesn't necessarily get their point across. And everyone's been there. I've had good talks, bad talks, and everything in between. And I do think that the elevator pitch is really important. Obviously, your introduction is really important. How you engage from a public speaking perspective, it does come naturally to some people, and everyone has a different way of preparing and delivering public speaking. I mentioned in last week's episode that I went around the MCR sites, and the commercial director, he was worse than the interns were, and he's in an extremely senior position in an executive role in a big company. And it just goes to show that you're only going to get better if you practice. Some people just outright won't do it, and that's also okay, because if you lean into your strengths, that might not be one of your strengths. But I do feel that it is very useful to have a basic layer of understanding and experience and preparation to do public speaking. So let's talk about our thoughts, why do we do it and what our thoughts are. And then I think some tips in preparing, because I was actually also talking to our non-exec who does a lot of public speaking and how he prepares, which is interesting. So public speaking, Ben, do you need to do it, and why do you do it?
Yeah, I think it's a skill that you need to at least understand and get confident with. I know you said some people point blankly refuse to do it, and I think you'll get some introverted people that have no interest whatsoever in doing it, and that I sort of feel like you have to push yourself outside your comfort zone a little bit sometimes. But I realize it's really, really tough for some people. Now, we've gained massively from getting our faces out there, getting up on stage. When you go to a networking event and there's 100 people there, if you don't get up at the front, you're probably only going to speak to maybe 5 or 6 people. And those people might not be the people that you really want to talk to, and you've missed out on the other 94. When you're up at the front and you tell people what you do, when you talk about what you're up to, the people that are going to want to work with you and you're going to want to work with them will come up to you. So instead of being 1 to 6, you're 1 to 100, and you also get the people that are probably going to move yourself and your business forward more come to you. You're attracting those people rather than seeking them. And I know people are, some people are shit scared of it, and I completely get that. And we spoke last week, it's not something I naturally, I'm still scared. I've done it numerous times. I still get nervous doing it, and that's always going to happen, I think. But I like the challenge, the challenge of kind of getting up there and pushing myself outside my comfort zone, and the achievement you feel afterwards. I think if you're gonna be in business, you need to learn how to sell. And public speaking is one thing in terms of getting up in front of lots of people, but the same skill set and confidence that you get from doing public speaking is also a massive attribute and skill that you should have for selling. You're always selling, no matter what you're in. If you're in business, you may not be selling a deal, but you might be selling yourself for future deals or for future investment or future collaboration. So understanding how to build rapport with people, how to influence them, and to I don't like using the word manipulate, but a lot of the time that is what you're doing. You're trying to manipulate people that you're speaking to provide an action that is beneficial to you, effectively. But you do that in a soft way, in a building rapport way, in a how can I help you type way, rather than what I see as the true meaning of manipulation, and that sort of without the other person's approval.
So don't do that very well.
No, it's a horrible word, but it's sort of hopefully it.
I think the book, obviously, Making Friends and Influencing People, is probably more down the line of rather than manipulation.
Yeah, is the word is still true, but it just sounds more deceitful, doesn't it, than anything else, which is not obviously what you're aiming for. But yeah, that's my take. I think it's a skill that I think everyone should try and learn. But you'll get, when we talk about like the property entrepreneur stuff that we've done in terms of the type of person you are, you've got a Blaze who is like out there and all outgoing and extroverted, and the opposite of that is the introverted Steele. It's the finance, the accountant that wants to sit in front of a computer and not speak to anyone, and public speaking is probably their worst nightmare. So you are going to get people that have no interest whatsoever, but I think we've seen firsthand the benefits of taking yourself out of your comfort zone and just doing.
Interestingly, you say I just find it very efficient to public speak. Like you say, your ratio of communicating who you are and getting your face out there is definitely my preferred method. Like even recently, I got asked by an event organizer if I wanted to go to an event, and my first thought was I want to host it. And I do get nervous, and I don't actually always enjoy the fear of getting onto a stage first to warm a crowd up just makes me cringe, and I hate that. I feel like I've got to act I almost think that if I was sat there watching me, I'd be like, oh, they're putting so much effort in, just talk. And that's how I perceive it's got to be. But once I get going, I do enjoy it, and I do like sort of thinking on my feet and managing sort of the day and the people and keeping to time and introducing people and explaining things if things might not be that obvious to everyone. So I do quite enjoy it. But exactly like you say, it's the efficiency part. I'd much rather go, do a talk or be on a panel, and then, sort of on the way in, network with a few people, and on the way out, network with a few people, rather than lumbering around all day. Just purely because that's, I just think it's way more efficient. But tips for speaking, which I thought would be relative, I think there's quite a few ways that you can prepare for public speaking. And when I had the conversation with our non-exec advisor, we were talking about my brother's wedding and preparing for that speech. And we actually talked about that in the last week's episode. But interestingly, I sort of said, what is your style? Because I've seen him do speeches. He did one at his 70th. I've also saw him do one at his wedding. And I've also seen him do sort of various snippets on LinkedIn. And he's always so good at delivering talks. And his method is prompt lines, which is what I do as well. I'm not a massive reader, so I don't typically read things line by line and word by word and letter by letter, because that will make me more uncomfortable to try and translate the message that I'm trying to get off. I just jog my memory with a short, very, very short sentence. So for an example, let's say I'm presenting a deal. I might have the address. So I will say, I did a project in Oxfordshire, and then I might talk through the high level numbers, Typically, I'll probably know that off the top of my head. And then I might have prompt of categories. So the top category might be purchase. Second category might be build or planning. But I won't write anything else. I'll just write planning, build, and then my mind will do all the rest of the talking. So the structure is prompted by words on paper, but then the actual wordage is coming off, the top of my head. I know that if you have that in slides, you might have bullet points, and in those bullet points you elaborate. But even some people will then have the notes on the presentation form, so I can read it line by line. So all I would say to you is try both. See what you're most comfortable with, whether you would rather read almost word by word, whether you would rather sort of improvise on each topic point. And what you have to remember is everyone there doesn't actually know what you have to say until you say it. So don't worry about missing something or doing something slightly wrong. And be also prepared to throw in a few things. If you think of something, don't be afraid to, reference a point that an audience member asked a question. So that's like one method, which is prompt work. And then I know people that will do then sort of kind of direct line by line, word by word reading work. And then there's also learning it off by heart work, which is where you just completely learn it off by heart. So that's almost like the preparation, and that's down to you. Whatever method you prefer, that's the best. It is a bit easier when you're talking about something and don't be afraid to not know anything. Just say that's not my bag, my speciality's in here. I'll kindly move on from that, or have a chat with you in the break and see how we get on. As far as the nerves, I'm not really a public speaking nerve psychologist, but I try and not think about it. I just try and think about other things, and then as soon as I go up. That's quite difficult because you have to learn to compartmentalize, and you're also trying to remember what you need to do at what point. And it's always really good to have someone aside to help you, so you can have a prompter, or even if you need to get on or off stage, or even, this is why I love panels, because you don't really need to prepare anything. You're only getting asked questions that are off the top of your head. You just sit there, answer as best you can, and then you move on. But I hope that sort of preparation stuff might have been useful to enable you guys to learn about public speaking. Another thing that I think is really important is eye contact with the room and move around the room. So don't just look down. And then also projection of voice, because the amount of times I've been to a talk, and this happens all the time, and I'm like, I cannot actually hear everything that they're saying. And it's such a shame, because they've gone to all the effort to pull it all together, all the stress to get up on stage, and then you can't hear them. And a good host will kind of, interject and try and get the volume up. But sometimes that doesn't actually happen. So I'd highly recommend to make sure you ensure your projection comes across, and that will help with confidence, your confidence and your perceived confidence, which is really important. Loads of speakers rush, and that's natural. And if you think about it, when you're less experienced and you rush, you make it even worse for yourself, because you give yourself less time to plan and think. Whereas if really experienced speakers are so comfortable to just slow it all the way down and slow the context, and then it gives them a lot more time to think and talk and do. And that's where it comes like beginner's trap, that you don't want to be doing that. So eye contact, projection, speed is really important. I think gestures, you notice I've probably just been doing some gestures there, are really good, because it makes it a little bit more engaging than if you just stood there like this. Like one of the king's arm, what are they called, soldiers with a tall hat on, and try and enjoy it. And all I would recommend is try new things and just try and get better, and that's it. Because then you're only competing with yourself, and I think that's really important with public speaking. Because I see some public speakers, and I'm like, I don't even know how they're that good at that. But you're not them, and they're not you. You're better at other things, so just do the best you can.
Nice. I think you've pretty much touched on a lot of the stuff that I was going to talk about. I think the presenting confidently, like, I know you're not going to be confident, and it's gonna be difficult to kind of not close your shoulders in and turn away a little bit, but stand there, shoulders back, be confident in your sort of openness of your body, and direct it to everyone. The slowing down thing, I think, is massive. Like, you're when you're nervous, your heart's going to be racing, and you know it's going to want to try and force you to just speak a lot faster and get through it as fast as you possibly can. But by slowing down, like Jack says, it gives you the time to think. So like deep breaths, just try to slow it down, like to the point where you think you're the dumbest person in the world because you're speaking so slowly, but I guarantee it won't be that slow to the people viewing. But really try and slow things down. And then I was going to say the only other thing I guess that I had on my list was if you have a presentation to present, do not make it just full of bullet points and really wordy. Like maximum 5 points per slide, and it should only be 4 or 5 words that kind of jog your memory to then go into the conversation around the points that you're talking about. Do not have like 3 sentences per point, because people are going to start reading the words and not listening to you as the presenter. You know, the slides need to give a quick indication of the topic of conversation, and you then need to elaborate and beef out everything that you're talking about in terms of that topic. And you know, I see it. We did our property entrepreneur day, you know, last week, and you could see, you know, some people didn't get through the first 3 of 10 slides because they panicked. They started waffling on around things. They had basically a slide full of text, and that's not going to be good for anyone. So yeah, keep your slides simple, and yeah, listen to all the other tips that we've just talked about. Cool, good. We have an exciting opportunity on the 28th of October. It's a Tuesday. We're going to be opening at 10 till 2 p.m. And it is an open day for you know, potential investors to come and visit some of the projects that we've completed. This project will be 95% complete by the 28th of October. Our show flat's going to be ready in about 2 weeks' time. It's the conversion of 2 large HMOs into 9 luxury flats. So we've got a large 100 square meter basement. We've done various extensions to the loft, to the rear, to the side. And we've completely refigured the internals completely. So yeah, it's in Muswell Hill, North London. There will be a link to register your interest down in the description if you want to come along for, you know, half an hour or an hour or 2 hours, whatever you might need. But it will be Tuesday, the 28th of October, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And registrations are now open to come and join us. Cool. And Jack said at the start, so we were judges at the Property Investor Awards on Monday. So we all got in a room in Shawbrook Bank's swanky new offices in central London. And we reviewed the best part of 7 or 8 nominated categories for Property Deal of the Year, Property Deal or Property Development and Sustainable Development of the Year, Best Commercial Development of the Year, all sorts of interesting and different developments and investments with some really quirky and cool strategies that, you know, we'll probably take away into some of the stuff that we look at. But yeah, we just wanted to talk about some of the things that we found interesting. So you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll start off with just the format of voting, which I think was really good. So the way that it was formatted, I don't think I'm under any form of NDA to share this, is basically I've been to award events or even awards where it's just judged by one person. So they get a category, they get a group of categories, they review loads of applicants, and then they pick an applicant. But where I feel that that's missing is you might have people that are drawn more to charisma, people that are drawn more to success in financial measures, drawn more to design, and it doesn't give it a very eclectic and fair and balanced view on that particular award. So as an example, the Sustainability Award, there was a scheme that was put forwards, and some people were looking at it purely from how sustainable it is from a materials and ethical perspective, and others were looking at the financial reward. So it's good to have almost a conflict, I suppose, like jury and judge in any sort of court. The judges collectives have all got different opinions, and they all come together to come to a well-established view. Obviously, we don't know who any of the winners are because it's an anonymous grading that we would put forward independently, and we don't know what everyone else scored that person. But I just wanted to say I thought it was very apt, because sometimes you sit at these awards and someone else beats you, and I've definitely been in this seat where I go, they couldn't have. I'd love to see their numbers. And now knowing the process, I can confidently say that, and obviously it wasn't for this award category, this award category group, which is the Property Investor Awards, but I can now confidently say that anyone going for the awards in Property Investor Awards should be confident that it is fairly graded, and that they probably, if they came second, they are second. So I do think that it was a very thorough process. And then I'll hand over to you, and I've got some more as well.
Nice. Yeah, just some of the things that I enjoyed. I liked hearing the hardship and the problems that people overcome. Like, you could look at just a spreadsheet and the total overarching figures of a deal, and come to one conclusion, but unless you know the story behind it and the problems that they've overcome, how they've overcome them, like that makes a deal better, if they've had to overcome significant challenges to get to where they've got to. So yeah, that was one of mine.
I'm actually going to use similar back to the conflict. I really enjoyed it when there was conflict in the room, because it made it so prevalent how different people look at different things in different ways. And so for my listeners out there, I think the most valuable thing that I can say is try and put yourself in almost the judge's shoes, and think to yourself the question. Obviously, you're just looking at your deal, but when you're submitting a deal for an award, think about the award and what the context is behind that, and then try and put yourself in the judge's shoes. We have done this before, but it's normally quite difficult, because normally we just go numbers, 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 numbers. Look how great this deal is. But actually, if you go, you think about sort of profit return, design, risk, everything will be considered. So from an application perspective, try and put yourself in the judge's shoes.
Nice. One thing that I felt afterwards was missing from a lot of the figures from the people were the yearly IRR, an annual rate of return. A lot of people were focusing on just pure ROI, but and sometimes overlooking the difference of the timeframes associated with that ROI. Like, some people are like, well, that was a 60% return on investment. Yeah, but it took them 4 years. That's not as good as a 30% ROI over a 12-month span. So I think when you're looking at any development or investment, you need to understand the true interest rate of return over the time frame it takes. So taking your total, dividing it by the amount of years spent in that deal, that's going to give you a blended kind of annual rate of return. So I thought that was something that was missing from some of the entries. And I just have one more, which was the 1-minute videos. So as part of your submission, you have to submit a 1-minute video explaining the project, the high level figures, and actually 1 minute isn't long. So it makes you really think about what's the really key information that I need to portray here. So in that 1 minute, you need to really sell the story of what the project is about. You need to give enough information to understand the deal itself, because we did get to the end of some 1-minute videos, and the questions were asked around the room, like, what do you think about that deal? And some people were like, well, a lot of the room were like, well, I don't really get it. Like, I'm not really sure what the high level figures are, or what they took it from to what it became. They've only just talked about what it ended up as. So yeah, selling the story, talking about the key headline information, and within a minute you're going to have to cut out the fluff, which is good, and it's why it should be just a minute, because it gets you to the point and gives hopefully clarity within that time frame. Anything else?
Make sure you enter the right category. There are a few deals that I probably thought weren't quite in the right category, which is, and then just about awards. Like I actually got into, I don't know, Ben, I don't know if you got interview with other videographer while we were there, but they said, why would you go forward for an award? We have one of these. Well, I think we actually have a couple of these swanky Property Investor awards in our office. And it's really good for branding, getting your name out there, reputation, third-party recognition. Also, family and friends start to realize that you're the best in your industry for that particular thing, whether it's the deal, the business, the entrepreneur of the year, or whatever, which is all really valuable stuff. And it's good fun when you're up for an award. It is a little bit of a letdown when you don't get awarded one, which we've had more than not. And then it is amazing and exciting when you do win an award. I remember was it 2021, 2022 when we had a table and went to the dinner. I think that was one of my favorite nights, full stop, because we didn't think we had won it, and then we did. And alas, very good fun.
Yeah, we had a couple of our investors at that awards dinner, so for them to it's almost kind of vicariously like they're winning through us, which is awesome. So yeah, if you want to enter into next year's awards, let us know down below. We can send you the link to kind of start registering for next year's awards. Sadly, this year's nominations are closed, but yeah, make sure you get your nominations in for next year. And actually, it's probably worth saying, but the actual awards night is the 15th of November.
15th of November, yes. Yeah. And I was going to say we have an opportunity for any of our listeners to come and join our table, the XP table. It will be paid. You have to pay, but it is significantly cheaper than if you bought just 1 or 2 tickets. So DM us, message us, do whatever you need to do. We've got limited spaces. I think we've only got a few left on our table of 10, like literally 3. But yeah, maybe an opportunity for you to ask Q&A live.
There you go, whilst having a few beers. Cool. Solving a problem for clients. This was one of yours, wasn't it? Go on.
Yeah, I popped this in, but it sounds like you've got an example of it.
No, you go for it.
So I am a business owner, product owner, service owner. And what really pisses me off is when I buy a product, and I'm talking about, let's just say I'm buying a new wheel for my wheelie bin, for an example. That's a really bad example, but I'm going to run with it. Let's just use that as an example. It absolutely grinds my gears if there's a cock up or there's an error that's made by the supplier or the product maker, and they don't use that opportunity to prove that's why you would go back to them or use them. And it's also just do a duty of care, I suppose, because realistically, if let's say I make an order and it doesn't come, I then reach out to them, and if I need good communication, I still just want the product. I'm not expecting a refund or whatever it may be. I'm just reaching out and be like, why hasn't the product been delivered? And I think in that opportunity, it gives that supplier the chance to either come back better from this issue or significantly worse. I don't think you'll come back average, because you've now in a position where you average would have been the product being delivered. So we've had mainly communication issues to do with a particular survey, a huge survey. So, it's bound to have communication heightened issues. And it was on us to not only put it right, but go above and beyond and prove that we are the right supplier for them, because we've gone above and beyond. So as a result, there was a couple of things that were missed off intentionally because there wasn't access. And then we had to go get back access and blah, 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 blah. But essentially, we would then focus on being like, right, what's the client's priorities? Let's focus on them and work with the client, keep communication up. Maybe we need to offer a further service for the same cost. If there's a clearer further service that was, not intentionally our fault, we sometimes share that or even push that onto the client. But it's an opportunity for you to prove them why they need a relationship-driven business. And my friend runs a plant and tool hire company, and they are not the cheapest. You could go to HSS and get the exact same stock. Yeah, it's probably less maintained and got dents all over it because its turnover is higher. But he says the people use us because they can call us on a morning, they get the service they need that day, and they pay more for that. And I'm a massive believer in paying a little bit more for service, because that's how I like to operate. I'd much rather work with a person rather than being completely price driven. and that's how I've always been. I'd always like to go to a local restaurant that's independently owned rather than a chain where they got frameworks that people get trained in this, that, and the other, and it's just very, very samey. So that's always the way I've been. But for you, what is a key thing to do is potentially, I know Stuart Wyeth did this in his loft business, is he goes through all of his problems that he had over the last month with his whole team, identified could that problem be resolved by a system or a process or a change in the business, and then also make sure the client has felt like you've gone above and beyond to fix that problem, because obviously that client could be a repeat client. If you continuously do that in your business process gets bigger, better and better and better, and your feedback and your service and your product gets better and better and better. If you're not making those continuous improvements, you'll eventually have to completely always throw new business into your business, whereas repeat business is really higher margin revenue for you guys.
Nice. Solid points. And on to, a really, really happy moment yesterday when we were presented with a check, a massive, one of those big comedy checks for £5,750 in aid of Oxfordshire Mind, the charity for mental health awareness. So our charity paddle game was a couple of Fridays ago, from 7 a.m. through to midnight. We played paddle and had about 40-50 people sort of coming in throughout the day to support us, to play, to chat, to network, to reminisce. And over the last couple of weeks, we've been finalizing the donations, and massive heartfelt thank yous to all of you who have donated towards this very, very worthy cause, very close to my heart. Thanks to all the team from Central Suites, XP Property, XP Surveys, Aura, for sort of setting things up and being the staple paddlers during the day. I think we ended up at about £4,800 plus some gift aid, which adds about 20% on top of that, I think. We ended up at 5,750 quid. So thanks to everyone who donated. On to next year's, I guess.
Yeah. Any suggestions on what activity we should do next year? Would people be up for keeping it the same and coming along themselves, or should we do something else?
TBC.
Yeah.
Cool. On to point number 8, which is handing over a freehold management company. We completed Sunset Court 2 years ago now, I guess, 18 months ago. But we held one of the flats because ultimately, we couldn't sell it. So we rented it out for a little bit, but we've now found a buyer, and we are due to complete tomorrow on the sale of that final flat in the development. There's 6 units, 2 houses and 4 flats. We're selling it share of freehold, but until that final unit is handed over, we as XP are the managing agent for the property. We are the ones organizing all of the landscaping, the window cleaning, the insurances. We are directors of the management company, the freehold management company. We don't want to be anymore because we've sold them all. So over to you. And I last week met with the owners of all of the other 6 properties. To put things into perspective, most of them are very elderly. It was exactly what we wanted from that site. It's right off the high street, literally 100 meters walk off of the high street. It's a lovely little community. Like, everyone gets on really well. They go over for tea and cakes and keep each other entertained. Some of them are recently widowed, and one of the owners actually passed away. So it's a really nice community to have sort of introduced, and that downsizer market is who we were targeting for that development. So it's great to see it go to that. But it's no longer our responsibility to manage the freehold and how the site operates. So it's basically over to them. And, most people don't understand how freehold management companies work, don't really understand that when you're a leaseholder, ultimately there is a freeholder that has to coordinate and take responsibility for all of the services that are needed to keep that block running. But most people just don't want to know or aren't involved in the process. So to have a share of freehold gives control over to the six tenants. But it also comes with responsibility. So I just wanted to run through some of the things that we've done to to give them a helping hand to get that process as seamless as possible. I think we've made a few mistakes and we haven't been as good as we could have done. So, this was a good test case for us, and hopefully you can take some of these things away and learn from them. Very early on, we have a service charge breakdown, a schedule of service charges. So even before buying the properties, you're buying one of the flats, a solicitor is going to ask you for a service charge breakdown. What are the expected costs? How is it broken down? Where's it all going? What management costs are in there? What accountancy costs are in there? How many times or what's the cost of cutting the grass or cleaning the windows? All of that needs to be broken down and handed over to your solicitor so that the incoming buyer knows what to expect in terms of where their money for service charges goes. And it's only ever an estimate at that point. Ultimately, what happens after the 12-year year is over, you'll actually calculate the actual spend and then reimburse or ask the owners for more money to cater for the extra spend in the service charge. But everything is basically paid for up front, and then it's recalculated at the end of the year. So make sure that your service charge budget is up to date, that everything can be substantiated and verified. And if you've got to the point where the end of the year is up and you have charged for all of the services, the likelihood is that the buyers are going to want receipts and invoices for the works that have been undertaken and the works that they've effectively paid you for. You'll need to set up a limited company, so Sunset Court Management Company, for example, and that will need to have directors, and it will also need to have the owners of the other properties as members of that company. So limited companies for freehold management are set up in slightly different ways. Ours is limited by, what was the difference? So you get like limited by shares, I think, which is where a normal company would be set up in a shareholdership. But then you get another option, which is limited by guarantee, I think it is. So ultimately, not all of the owners have to become directors of the property, but you still need generally one or two people that are willing to put their name in the hat to be a director of that limited company and take ownership and basically sort of run the management company. And then all of the other owners will have some sort of share certificate or ownership certificate to say that they are members of the freehold management company by default of owning one of the flats or freehold houses within the development. So all of that needs to be set up and handed over. So they're going to have to sign on as a director. They're going to have to fill out relevant forms. And basically on handover, what we're saying is that Jack and I are coming off the company as directors. We are handing that over to the new directors, and that comes with certain responsibilities. The company has to have a bank account. So, we've got a company at the moment set up with Metro. I then have to take the two directors of the new management company to Metro, sign documentation to hand over ownership of that bank account and give them the reins to do whatever they want to with the bank account. And going back on the service charges, if as a collective, the 6 owners decide that they don't want to do any landscaping or have a gardener come in to do the landscaping, then that is a cost that can be removed from the service charge and they would pay less service charge. Or they decide to keep the service charge the same amount, and the difference becomes just a float or some extra money in the account for unforeseens, like if they have to block a drain or a gutter falls off or something like that, where they have to do some works to put it back together. So that they can decide how they use that money, basically. And this is what they wanted to do. They're all old. They all keep the gardening and the planting and stuff well kept themselves. They don't need a gardener. No, they want to be doing that themselves, so they can save that cost on the service charge and they get free rein to make that decision. But they need a bank account set up in order to do it. The meeting that we have needs to be minuted in terms of the things that were discussed, and then sent over to all of the owners. And ultimately, if there are any important board meetings or directors meetings that have happened up to that point that outline some of the key decisions that have been made as part of the management company when we owned it, then we should also hand over that information so that they have a backlog of some of the decisions that were made. Maintenance and snags, they're going to need a list of all of the ongoing contracts that you may have. If you have somebody come out to grit the car parking area in the winter or clean the windows, if there are contracts that have been signed that is a 2 or 3 year contract, they're going to need the details of that, because they're going to be taking over that communication and coordination of those services. So making sure they've got a long list of all the things that are happening as part of the service charges, all of the contacts with the people that are currently doing it, and they're free if they want to cancel those contracts and go elsewhere if they really want to, but they need all that information to start. One of the issues that we've had is that we've been dilly-dallying. There's no mistake. Like we knew that there was some work that was needed to be done on some of the fascias and gutters on the site. We had been delaying it. They'd been holding off service charges, paying us the service charge. We just hadn't got around to doing it. But ultimately, to sell the 6th flat, it came up in the conversation that the elderly gentleman has been looking up at his gutters, and they're not painted. They're not painted, and they need to be painted so they don't deteriorate over time. Blah blah blah. And that actually became a sticking point for our final sale, because the buyer was unwilling to move forward unless we gave them written authority or written correspondence to say that we will address those issues that would become a latent management issue for her when she buys the new flat. So if we didn't do it now, she's going to have to pay more as part of her service charge to get it done at a later date, unless we say in writing that we're going to do it, which we were, and we did. But yeah, making sure that all of those kind of snags and maintenance issues are wrapped up before handover, and you can draw a line under the sand once it's all been handed over. And then I've put here, expect nonsense. It's like herding cats. I've had this before on another block of flats that I own in Reading. You've got different temperaments, different characters, different wants, different needs. Ultimately, in this development, they're all elderly. They've got a lot of time on their hands, so there'll be a lot of things that get discussed that probably aren't your issue, or are easy to fix, but they're fixated on talking about them. And most likely, they're going to give you checks to go and cash for the service charges instead of just back transfer, which most people do nowadays. But that's the elderly generation for you. But yeah, hopefully that's been useful for you to understand sort of what's involved in, once you've finished a development, handing over the management company, if you are doing so, to the rest of the buyers, and making sure that's as seamless as you can make it. Cool. Just some quick questions which we've had come in. Thanks, Amith. He sent me a floor plan and has asked me whether or not he can get an ensuite and an off suite out of just this small family bathroom here. And ultimately my answer was no. It's too tight to squeeze in 2 showers. It's 2.84 meters long by 1.6 meter in depth. So if you chop that in 2, you're going to end up with a 1.3.5, 1.4 meter wide ensuite by 1.6, or 1.4 by 1.6. I've got to say, like, my ensuite in my master bedroom at home is about 1.7 by 1.6. So it's not far off this, but my ensuite is super tight. Like, it is like the most efficient ensuite that I've ever seen. And in reality, I don't think this is enough space for you to do it. What you can do, and what I suggested, was to basically steal a little bit of space from the kitchen, and Bob's your uncle, you will easily be able to fit 2 ensuites in there by just nicking about, let's say, a meter of space from the kitchen.
Yeah, you could also make that kitchen open plan so you don't really feel like you've lost anything in the kitchen. Yeah.
So a few options there. And then we talked about our client portal last week. And if you haven't tuned into that, I talk about utilizing an AI platform called Replit to essentially build whatever tools you want within your business. We're building a client portal for XP surveys for clients to access their drawings, for us to manage projects internally, and then also for a freelancer marketplace where we can launch projects out to our marketplace. They bid for the work and then they win the work, etc. And Stephen's very sensibly asked, kind of with the portal, what's to stop the external architect or external surveyor to poach a new client for themselves? I appreciate you might have combated this, interested to hear. And it's a very good point. I mean, anyone signing up to our portal will have a service level agreement with us. There will be NDAs and non-disclosure agreements to say that they will not be doing that type of thing. And in reality, it's actually no different to our current situation, because more often than not, it's maybe an agent letting them in, or it's not actually the end like we work with architects, right? So the architects are booking the survey in on behalf of the client. The client themselves is the one letting our surveyor in, or the agent is letting the surveyor in to do the works. And ultimately, that person that's on the ground doing the survey rarely ever has any direct communication with the architect that has instructed it. So we're one step removed anyway, and most of our architects never have direct communication with the person actually doing the survey. It's often through our admin portal and Laura in the office, for example. So service level agreements, non-disclosure agreements, all of that type of stuff. To sign up to our portal, you'll have to sign up to all of those types of things, and that's how we protect from from people poaching. I think ultimately, if you're concerned about that, I think it's a very minor issue in the grand scheme of what we're trying to achieve in terms of that freelancer marketplace. And it might happen, but the amount of times that it will happen will be negligible compared to the wider benefits of doing what we're trying to do.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Uber Eats of restaurant. There's nothing stopping anyone going direct to the restaurant and making an order, or Open Table contacting the restaurant directly, but it's to bring one platform together. So hopefully, almost like the pre-qualifying both ends to protect the service and make sure there's almost like a grading system for quality, and us being a part of that makes it our responsibility to make sure the service is good.
Yeah, cool. Well, hopefully that's been interesting and useful for people this week. As always, get your questions down below ready for next week. And sorry if we haven't had time to answer some of the live questions this week, but we will get through to them next week. So yeah, have a great weekend, everyone. And don't forget to like, comment, share, do all that good stuff on Spotify and Apple, because we want this to go as far and as wide as possible. So thanks very much, and speak to you next week.
Bye.
Bye.